What's up, y'all? I'm DJ Nate, and this is the Ben Jarofsky Show. This show is brought to you in part by you, the listeners. As we find our bearings as an independent podcast, we would greatly appreciate your extended support, whether that be regularly listening to our show, sharing this episode, following us on social media, or if you have the means, you can donate at thebenjarofskyshow.com.
Hello again, everybody. Ben Jarofsky here. We're calling this Schumer Buckles Friday, and here's why. Last night, Charles Schumer, Senator, leader of the Democrats, leader in quotes, announced that he'd be voting with MAGA, voting with Trump, voting with Musk on the continuing resolution. David Faris standing by. He's going to explain to every one of you what this all means. The shorthand goes like this. I will read this headline in the Washington Post dropped this morning, and then we'll turn it over to David. Schumer to vote for GOP bill to avert shutdown. Some Democrats bristle at his decision. Let me just read that last part. Some Democrats bristle at his decision. I have to smile, man. Dude, pretty much every Democrat I know was sending me texts last night. F-bomb dropping. Fuck Schumer. They're so mad at Schumer. And I'm like, Washington Post, some Democrats. Some Democrats? You think? Some Democrats? The Washington Post couldn't find 5 Democrats out of 100 who like what Schumer did. Okay? I give you that challenge. And to understand why so many Democrats are mad at Schumer, to understand, well, I know my lefty listeners know this stuff, but to understand the dynamics going on, to understand what's at stake, to understand how this vote would be just turning over even more power to Elon Musk and Donald Trump at the very moment when the Democrats have one opportunity to play a little hardball, to maybe force a concession or two. To understand the full dynamics of this situation and why so many Democrats, real Democrats, the ones at Democratic Party, no matter who's going to be running for president in 2028, even if it's Rahm Emanuel, that's a joke, but we'll need, this is the heart and soul of the Democratic Party, okay? To understand why they're so upset with this, I'm going to turn things over to David Faris. So first of all, David, welcome back. Good to see you. And second of all, take it away. Go ahead.
Thanks, Ben. It is great to be here as we watch our national Democrats capitulate in the most craven possible way, as they've been doing for so many years. So yeah, just a really depressing situation, but I think also very much in keeping with the ethos of most of the senior leadership of the party, although I'll note that this news just broke in the last hour that Nancy Pelosi is like personally lobbying Democrats in the Senate not to vote for the continuing resolution. So, I'm going to exempt her from like basically everything that I'm about to say.
Okay. Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, I mean, frustration, I think, among the rank and file is really building because it just seems like a lot of senior elected Democrats, including our 2 leaders in each chamber of Congress, Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, are just not up to the fight. Have a reading of this situation that is much closer to James Carville's, I think now infamous New York Times op-ed, where he said, just roll over and play dead and let the Trump people screw up and then reap the rewards. And I couldn't emphasize enough that is just not where the base of the party is right now. At the base of the party is livid. They have like awoken from their post-election slumber, are re-engaged, re-energized. They're the people that are like doing these big protests at Tesla dealerships and are leading all of these efforts to stop the Trump administration from doing the things that it's doing. And they don't want to just wait and see, right? They want to use their power, the very limited power, but very real power that Democrats have in Congress to stop the Trump administration from doing things that are illegal and unconstitutional. They don't want to wait for it to play out in the courts. They want our elected representatives to gum up the works until Republicans agree not to do some of the things that they're doing, right? Like, you have to be realistic, right? Like, we're not getting national health care next year, right? Like, we're not getting another great climate bill or anything, right? Like, nothing good is going to happen in the next 4 years. But like, all people are asking is like, you got to stop funding the government. You have to stop helping Republicans govern the country, right? You have to stop letting them avoid their own worst instincts by providing votes for their funding bills, right? And House Democrats actually stepped up and didn't vote for the thing. And then it's in the Senate, and the leader of the Democrats in the Senate has like publicly capitulated with this like bananas reasoning about how like, well, this shutdown would be really bad because Trump will use it to do corruption. He's going to use it to dismantle the government. And I'm like, dudes, what do you think is happening right now? You know, like, how could it be any worse than it is right now? I simply don't understand. And if they want to completely hobble the government and prevent it from doing all of its important work, because they won't agree to a simple demand that like the White House spend the money that Congress appropriates as the Constitution and as like multiple laws require them to. It's a very basic ask that Democrats are doing, right? They're not asking to steer the policy conversation, right? Like, the people that want to fight are saying, put something in the bill that says the money has to be spent the way the money has to be spent. Like, President Trump cannot impound the money, turn off the spigot of cash to agencies and plans that Congress authorized. He can't do that. And Republicans in Congress won't do it. And Schumer's take on it, I guess, is that like, well, if we just, it's a 6-month continuing resolution, right? Like, just give them until September. They'll be terrible at it, and then we just, we play dead. And when the public turns against Republicans, we'll benefit. We don't really have to, we don't have to shut down the government. That would be bad. And it's like, you guys are just, they're just living on a different planet, Ben. I just don't know what's going through his head. It's insane.
Yeah, they're living on a different planet. And this, by the way, is the strategic leader of the Democrats in the Senate. This is, I can't emphasize it enough. This is the brains behind the Democratic Party in the Senate. And so when I was following it last night, and I was up late following it obsessively, David, maybe too obsessively, I had flashbacks to a Chicago moment. And the Chicago moment took place during Mayor Rahm's first term, when he essentially had the city council codify one of the most unpopular moves the city has made in my lifetime. And that says a lot. And that's when the city privatized the parking meter dealers and sold them for a fraction of their worth. Thus, in one fell swoop, giving billions to rich people who most of them didn't live in Chicago, and depriving the city of a source of revenue, much needed revenue that it could borrow against, et cetera, and so forth. Terrible deal. And what Rahm did, he tinkered around the edges in a renegotiation, and then had the city council pass it again and cut off at the knees anyone who had gone to court to fight it. He essentially codified a horrible deal. And this was on my mind, David, when I read a tweet that AOC put out, who is pretty much the Democrat right now, the Democratic leader on this front. And she essentially used that word. She said, passing this resolution, this continuing resolution, would codify the cuts that Musk and Trump are making. And that's what brought back the Rahm deal. When they want something to go away, they know they're in trouble with the rank and file. They have to throw something out that looks like they're doing something, and they really are not doing anything but making it worse. This is what they do, essentially. Why don't you help us out a little bit? What does she mean, AOC mean, when she says they're codifying the cuts?
Well, just to give you one example, right? Like, the Trump administration just arbitrarily decided to change the funding formula for grants from the National Institutes of Health. So they're dramatically reducing the NIH budget, and then they're forcing universities who receive these grants to like use a different percentage of it for overhead. You know, in other words, to like keep the lights on and pay the administrators and that kind of stuff. So they've like cut the amount of money that you can use for general expenses related to the grant from like 45% to 15%, I think. And the bill codifies that. Okay. And so I think what AOC is saying is like, don't do that. Right? Like, the situation is this, right? Like, Republicans were able to pass this thing on a party line vote in the House. But they need to clear the filibuster in the Senate, right? Which means they need 7 Democrats to vote for this spending bill, or else they can't get it through the House, and the government will shut down. And you know, the instincts of the senior party leadership are just like, well, we're not in power, and we're the anti-shutdown party, so we got to basically sign whatever they send us. And you know, Schumer was like, we got them to let us make amendments, and it's like the amendments are all going to fail, Chuck, because you don't have a majority in the Senate. So it's like the only leverage they have is to keep, you know, most of their caucus unified behind a filibuster until Republicans capitulate to whatever demands they want to make. Now, that could be reversing some of the cuts. I think, you know, like reversing all of the cuts is not realistic. But you make a stand on a couple of the big cuts. I think, you know, like NIH, you know, cancer research, that would be a good one that'd be a good hill to die on here. But also inserting some kind of language that requires the president to spend the money in the continuing resolution as Congress demands, right? Like what AOC and the kind of like fight, I could just call them the fighting caucus. What they want is a sort of like a binding agreement that Trump will stop this illegal impoundment of money that Congress has allocated, which, you know, like if you sign off on that, what it means is that Congress is now essentially just like an advisory body to the president and has no meaningful power. Now, like the power over spending is the single most important job that Congress has. It is the single most important job that it has in our constitutional system. And if you say to Congress, like, you know, pass a bill, but I'm going to spend the money however I want on whatever I want. You know, you allocate $500 million for the National Institutes of Health, but I don't really feel like it. I'll spend 200 of it, and I'll take the other 3 and I'll spend it on whatever I want. If you allow that to happen, right? Like, I honestly don't think that's going to get through the Supreme Court, right? But like, it's going to take some time to work it out. And what you would have done is surrendered the co-equal nature of Congress's powers in our system, and said to the executive branch, like the budget that Congress passes will be more like the resolution that Republicans passed last month, which is like an outline that gets filled in later. So Congress will be essentially saying to the White House, like, here's a spending outline, here's a check, do what you want with it. You know, which I think is not an acceptable relationship to maintain between the branches of government. And so AOC and a lot of other Democrats are just boiling mad over the way that the party leadership just seems to want to roll over about this and just be like, well, the voters will punish them eventually. And it's like, well, by then the damage will be done to the system, guys, you know?
Yeah. And I'm not even sure the voters will punish them. All right. Now let's get at that point. So I'd love for you to riff on this. So I understand that the vast majority of people in this country do not follow politics as obsessively as you and I do. I understand that, okay? But I do know, having followed politics for a long time, there's just some basics that really get translated beyond people like me to the masses who are not paying attention generally. And that is one, if you have a really contemptible villain and you have sort of sympathetic victims, if you will, okay? So in this case, they don't get more contemptible than Elon Musk. He's a villain, all right? Even Charles Schumer should recognize that. On the other side, there are like veterans who work for the federal government who've been fired. As you talked about, there's cancer research that's been halted. The villain is openly talking about trashing Social Security. There are going to be cuts at the Social Security Department. Folks start applying. They'd make you apply for Social Security on a computer by and large, David. A lot of people in this country are not connected through computers. They need to talk to an actual human being. You call on your phone and you talk to someone. They're firing those people. So you have the victims, you have the villains. I do not understand why this is such a hard choice. I read these articles in the Washington Post and the New York Times, in Politico, Democrats facing a hard choice. First of all, it's the Republicans' freaking disaster show. The Democrats, don't blame us. You guys got to get your act together. Don't look at us. So the Democrats bring this stuff on here, and I'm sorry, I don't see the votes they lose for standing up in this issue. Feel free to vehemently disagree with me, David, on this point, but I don't see the hard choice. Go ahead.
No, it's not a hard choice. I mean, what we should have learned over and over again over the past 15 years is that the party that gets blamed for shutting down the government, right, will take a hit, right? But it's temporary. And we already have polling that shows the public is not going to blame Democrats for this. Quinnipiac put out a poll yesterday that showed 30% will blame Democrats, 30% will blame Republicans, and 20% will blame Trump. Okay. So basically a supermajority will blame Trump and the Republicans if there is a shutdown and not Democrats. Right. So even on the narrow issue of are we going to take a hit for this? They're not. Right. But even if they were, we're 18 months from the midterms, no sentient being on earth is going to cast their midterm vote based on who took the blame for a government shutdown in March of 2025. It's just not realistic. Okay. And I understand the impulse here, right? Which is it seems like Trump and the Republicans are inviting just a massive catastrophe that's going to be blamed exclusively on them. Right? The markets are unraveling, consumer confidence is down. This dude took a healthy economy and has plunged it into the toilet in the space of 6 weeks. Okay. And I understand the impulse. This is let's just get out of the way and let him do it, but I still don't think that that's the wise choice here. Right. Because there is more to politics and there is more to democracy than just letting your adversaries take the blame when they make mistakes. Okay. And there are things here that are principles worth standing on. Okay. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that the public is super sad about cuts at the, the weather forecasting agency and the executive branch. Okay, they should, I wish they were, but they're not probably. What's going to turn the public, and what is already turning the public, is that there's some things that you cannot propagandize away. Okay, Republicans have created a closed loop information universe, and they feed the lies to their viewers and their listeners and their readers, and the viewers, listeners, and readers are much less responsive to just objective reality than they used to be. That is how you see you saw the economic sentiment change virtually overnight when Trump was elected. Right, one day it's worst economy in the world, Biden. And then Trump gets elected. Everything is literally the same. And then, most Republicans the next day are I really love the economy. I mean, this is going really well. And I think it's actually notable that a lot of those people are now saying you can't hide losses to people's 401k. Right? And Trump has bled 4,000 points out of the Dow since inauguration day. There's multiple stock indexes that are now in correction territory. If he keeps starting trade wars on Truth Social every morning after he takes a crap or whatever, he's the damage that he's doing cannot be hidden. It can't be hidden by manipulating the data coming out of the federal government, which they're obviously going to do. But what you cannot hide from people is that their investments are declining. Right? What you cannot hide from people is that prices of eggs are going up, not down. What you cannot hide from people are the price increases that are coming from these tariffs, right? And that has all contributed to like a very sudden souring of the economic mood in this country. People are smart enough to know where to put the blame, right? Like Trump's like, it's Biden's fault. It's like, no, nobody's really buying that, right? Like, I think that's notable. All of this stuff happened after Trump took power. And so, yeah, it's like like Democrats could sit back and sort of like reap the whirlwind of public anger about what's happening. But like, I think that we should have higher expectations of our leaders than just like waiting for thermostatic public opinion to swing the other way and then be like, all right, we'll take power in 26 and then do nothing again. So it's like, it's not just about the failure to stand up and fight in this continuing resolution process. What it is, a broader signal to the Democratic rank and file that it's like, we hear you, we hear that you want us to fight harder. We hear you that you want us to like use procedural warfare and take all measures to fight Trump and the Republicans. We hear you and we're not going to do it. Because we have a different take on that. We think the public's going to blame us for it or something. And so we're not going to do it. So, go back. So vote for us in 26, send $5 immediately. We'll triple match it. Whatever,
And it's very important to point out at this stage, before I move on to this next question, the Republicans hold, to quote Trump, all the cards. The president's Republican, the House is controlled by the Republican Party, and the Senate's controlled by the Republican Party. The rules of the Senate, which I'm surprised they haven't moved to change these rules, David. This is the part I don't understand. Why they still have the filibuster, require to override a filibuster, you need to get 60 votes. Well, the Republicans don't have 60 votes. So they're looking for the Democrats to do their dirty work. And one more time, why Chuck Schumer would want to just willingly give up the one tiny chip he has in this game, I do not understand. It may have something to do with internal New York politics. I don't know. I'm not even going to go into Chuck Schumer's brain, but it's pretty. It's the worst bit of negotiating I think I've ever seen. Now let's move on to the Republican side of things. So follow me on the numbers, folks. 53 Republicans, 47 senators who caucus with the Democrats. Okay. So that means the Republicans need 7 Democrats to vote with them to end the filibuster if all 53 Republicans vote with the president. I got news for you guys. Right now, one Republican, Rand Paul, I just read this, has announced that he will not vote to end the filibuster because he does not believe in the principles that David just pointed out in overthrowing the principles that Congress has the power of the purse as opposed to the president. So here's my question. Where the hell are the other Rand Pauls in the Republican Party? I think it's always important to point this out. So supposedly there's some bedrock principles that Republicans abide by, and one of them would be the Constitution. They're always talking about liberty and freedom, and et cetera and so forth. So is there any possibility, in your humble opinion, that any other Republicans would be joining Rand Paul at this moment?
I'm not getting my hopes up. You know what I mean? Like what seems to be like what has settled over the Republican caucus in Congress is like the feeling that everybody had on the morning of November 4th. Just it's like they're just rolling with that. You know what I mean? And that feeling was like, well, Trump is the king. Came back from the dead. We better just accommodate ourselves to this new world where Donald Trump is king of the world. And are not they seem to not be responding to changes in public opinion at all. Like setting aside the constitutionality of what's happening, Republicans in Congress seem to have made a calculation that they simply cannot cross the president about anything. There have been multiple reports that a lot of people in Congress are like scared, not of losing a primary, but like they're like physically scared of Trump unleashing his minions on them and their families. Like they don't want to stand up to him because they don't want to become the new vilified targets of the far right. And they seem to also believe that like no matter what the impact or the fallout of the decisions that Trump is making, it's better for them to stay on his good side. In other words, like there's bigger risk in crossing Trump or standing up to Trump than there is of like losing the next election in 26 or 28 or whatever it is. And so he has gotten Republicans in Congress to sign off on things that, like, I'm still astonished that 50 plus senators voted to confirm Robert F. Kennedy to run the Health and Human Services Department, which is already like a visible tragedy. And it was like, if you think about the outbreak of measles in Texas and New Mexico, I believe it is, and like, children have died, and Kennedy's out there casting aspersions on the effectiveness of the vaccine, saying there's other reasons these kids die. It's insane, right? It's objectively insane to have confirmed Kennedy for that position. It's objectively insane to have confirmed Pete Hegseth to run the Department of Defense. It's objectively insane to have put Kash Patel in charge of the FBI. And yet he got almost every single Republican in the Senate to vote for these people, right? Which is not just a betrayal of everything that they professed that they had believed in, but will do real harm to their constituents, and will be a drag on their popularity. Like when these measles outbreaks keep happening, and they will, because the Republican Party has convinced its rank and file that vaccines are bad, and we are below herd immunity and almost everywhere in the country right now. Right, so this is just the first in a long line of like needless deaths that are going to be happening primarily to Republicans and their children as a consequence of decisions that Republicans have made. None of that was enough for them, right? And so when they folded on that, like when they folded on those nominees, right? Like I got my hopes up when Matt Gaetz was forced to step back. I was like, well, maybe they're going to hold on to some sort of like bare minimum line of like decency and competence to hold power in the executive branch of the American government. And that just all went away. And so I think like we're still a few months away from Republicans like looking at election polling and being like, this seems bad. Like maybe I should rediscover the location of my spine. But we're not there yet. Like in my mind, I doubt anybody's going to join Rand Paul. It's going to be like, he's not going to find his Renee Zellweger in there. You know what I mean? Like, Jerry Maguire, it's not happening. And the default assumption of the DC press, like this is a very common criticism, right? But it's like all of the agency about like anything that happens in DC is put on Democrats. Like there's multiple headlines that are like, will Democrats cause a shutdown? And it's like, Democrats don't run the government, guys. Like this is what AOC has been very effectively pointing out time and time again. She's like, you guys have both branches of Congress, the presidency, you basically run the Supreme Court, figure out a budget, and come back when you need us. But if you want something from us, you need to give us something, right? Like, and I do like, of course, Democrats should work to pass a budget if they get some of the things that they want out of it. But what Schumer is doing is he's getting nothing out of the negotiations. He's going to get nothing out of the amendments. And in exchange for that nothing, he's giving Republicans exactly what they want, which is a continuation of the blank check to Trump to use the money, whatever he wants, to empower his like Nazi billionaire lunatic friend to go and like unleash his algorithms on the Social Security system, fire like half the IRS. I don't know why anybody would pay their taxes this year. Just all kinds of craziness. And Chuck Schumer's like, well, I don't like the optics of standing up to him. And there's just enough Democrats in the Senate who feel the same way, I think, to get this thing through. And I think it's a huge mistake because I said this a couple of months ago. I don't know if I said it on the show, but like if you think back to the 2008 primary for president for the Democrats, the scene that emerged, right? I actually think the way that Obama won that nomination was having been like one of the few Democrats in the entire country who was like on the record as opposing the Iraq War when the authorization for the use of military force was taken in 2002. Obama was not in the Senate, right? But like there were public state he was opposed to. He was an Illinois state senator at the time. And Clinton voted for it. Hillary Clinton voted for it when she was in the Senate, right? And it stood in, like that incident stood in for a broader sense among Democrats that they could not stomach someone who made a habit of capitulating to Bush when Bush seemed invincible. I remember Howard Dean's "I'm from the Democratic wing of the Democratic."
Yeah, that was a good line.
And
yeah,
it didn't have quite enough juice in 2003, 2004, but like it did in 2008.
yeah.
And I think what a lot of people are not realizing right now is that the catastrophe to come and like all of these things are leading are like very bad outcomes for all of us if Trump doesn't start backing away from some of the crazier things that he's doing. And what people are going to be looking for in the 2026 primaries for Congress and the 2028 primaries for president is someone who you can go back and be like, this person stood up to Trump from day one.
Yeah.
This person never said like, well, looks like the winds have shifted. Better throw trans people under the bus. Like, looks like the winds have shifted. We better better pass that Lake and Riley Act. Like anybody that voted for that shit is not getting elected president.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, and that's where the base is. And the base makes the decisions in the primaries. And these guys are on the wrong side of it. And they better get on the right side of it right quick. Because the anger in the party is building very quickly.
I will now read to you. I think I may have sent this to you, but I'll read to you a text I got from a friend of mine. Shout out Benji. I think a pretty astute follower of politics and of sports, although he doesn't really understand the dimensions of tanking in the NBA, but we'll hold that off for another time. Benji got a lot to learn on that. But anyway, I thought this is a good text that he sent me, and I told him that I would read it to you and get your thoughts. So this came in the aftermath of, we were mocking with another guest, well, several guests, Gavin Newsom's podcast, which he sort of alluded to, where he brought on Charlie Kirk, and then they just trashed trans people. And then, of course, Mayor Rahm went on the Bill Maher show, and they trashed trans people. And this is what you're getting at. Democrats think they can regain the White House by finding scapegoats that they can join the MAGA in demolishing. Really cruel policy and really stupid. Anyway, so Benji writes, I admit I listen to Newsom podcast, but only to trash it in ratings and comments. I'll keep saying this. Instead of complaining about our party, I think you should have episodes devoted to fixing it. That will get people motivated and hopeful. And so I'd like you to respond to what Benji wrote, thinking about everything from the Gavin Newsom strategy of bringing on Charlie Kirk, the Chuck Schumer strategy of just allowing MAGA and Trump and Musk to do whatever they want and hope. What a weird strategy that the economy falls so bad that people rebel and vote for Democrats. I'm almost speechless, David, at the idiocy of that for everyone involved. So what can people proactively do to make the Democrats a fighting force that actually has the party have some meaning in this times? Go ahead.
Well, that's a tough one because the people in power are in power, right? And they don't have to face election for another year and a half, depending on when the primaries are being held. Right? So in a very real sense, we're stuck with the people that we have right now. I think the way forward for the party is to think about who we want to run, who we want to vote for, and what we want them to do in office as having like a procedural dimension. I mean, obviously this is kind of like my brand, Ben. Okay, I've been saying this for like 8 years now.
Yes, you have.
Right.
Yep.
But like, we need to make sure that the people that get through our primaries are people who are committed to using the power that they have when they are in office to do good things and to stop the fascist takeover of this country. And unfortunately, I think what that really means is that like we really need to just kind of like clean out the senior leadership of the party. Like there are too many like septuagenarian and octogenarian Democrats who are just mired in a bygone world. They've got terminal Joe Biden brain. And what terminal Joe Biden brain really manifests itself as is a commitment to norms and procedures and expectations and bipartisanship that is no longer being practiced by the other party at all. and that has constantly put us at a disadvantage in the Trump era, and even before the Trump era, because Republicans are using to use almost all the power that they have at all times. It's actually kind of shocking to me. I agree that they are still adhering to the filibuster rule. But for our purposes, like Schumer's got to go. I think that the activist wing of the base needs to start making some clear-cut demands. One, the leadership of the Senate needs to be passed on to someone who will use it to fight. They make Chris Murphy or Brian Schatz, like someone that's been actively going on TV and making public appearances and being very effective communicators of the idea that Democrats should not just sit back and let the bad things happen on the assumption that we will get back into power in 2026. What Democrats really need to be doing is like working with their activist base, like working with the rank and file to try to stop as much of what they can stop as they possibly can, right? And using tactics that we have thus far left entirely to the right. Like the Schumer Biden take on this is like, it's Republicans that do shutdowns, not Democrats. And our brand is not to do shutdowns. Because if both parties are willing to do shutdowns, then where are we? And I'm like, well, we're right here. Right. Like maintaining commitment to these dead norms, hoping that like just behaving like an adult and helping Republicans govern will bring the public along. I don't know how many times like we need to have that proven wrong before we understand the public actually doesn't care about any of this stuff.
Yeah.
They just don't. I mean, like, yeah. And these are the arguments that have been trotted out against like DC statehood, against court expansion, against all the stuff I've been writing about for years and years and years. They're like, oh, just imagine what Republicans would do in response. And I'm like, what could use your mind, guys. Like, what could be worse than what's happening right now? Like, they're like literally have empowered like an apartheid South African Nazi billionaire villain to like dismantle entitlements to like fire doctors in the VA. Just absolute like indiscriminate infliction of harm and aggrandizement of power that every Republican in Congress is signing off on. Right. And that's after 10 years of Democrats like almost always sticking to the norms that Republicans have forsaken. And this is where it has gotten us. Yeah. Like out of power with no idea how to get back into power, except hoping something really bad happens. Right. Yeah. And like, as somebody that's like, we're all on the airplane together, I don't want the economy to crash, Ben.
Yeah, I know.
You know what I mean? I can't afford it. I can't afford another one of these like spirals of inflation and job loss. And it feels like we're like reliving the early COVID period again, except we can leave our houses. But like, so that's, my message to people, like if you're like listening to this podcast and you're like, I just can't listen to this dude rant and rave for one more day if he doesn't tell me like one thing I can do. What people who have worked on the Hill will tell you over and over again is that your representatives pay attention to the volume of phone calls to their office.
Yeah.
Right. And I am not above picking up my phone and calling Dick Durbin and Tammy Duckworth and very pointedly asking them to do the right thing. I've done it many times since the election. And, believe it or not, like representatives do generally get a sense of when their constituents are angry at them and when their constituents want them to do a certain thing. Right. And so you got to call them, you got to lean on them, and you got to make it clear what you want. And the second part of that is that like people who insist on being on the other side of that equation need to go. Unfortunately, in the Senate, it's going to be a while before you can take some of these people out. I mean, peacefully in an election, Ben. Okay. But like, the person who's like consistent, like in the Democratic caucus, is like consistently making me the most angry over the past year is John Fetterman, who has been just an absolutely crushing disappointment as he turns into like an even less coherent version of Kirsten Sinema. Fortunately, he doesn't face re-election for another 3 years. So we're stuck with John Fetterman. But I think that we need to start imagining a post-Fetterman future and a post-Schumer future, and organizing not necessarily on the basis of the ideological divide, I think, that has defined the party for the past 10 years. And that's like the Bernie versus the Hillary wing, progressive versus centrist. These are important battles, right? But like, for my money, if I had the power to help replace Chuck Schumer, if I was a New York voter, what I would really be looking for is not necessarily AOC's ideology, but her fighting spirit.
Yeah.
Like her determination to use the power that she has.
Yeah.
And I think, when we hold our town halls and we hold our primary debates, and we need to try to get the primary electorate invested in the idea that to be a national elected official in the Democratic Party, you have to be a fighter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only way. That's the only real way to transform the party from the inside.
Yeah.
Unless you want to start some sort of like suicidal third party quest or something, But that's what needs to happen, right? And as individuals, you have the power to make those phone calls, to write those letters, to cast those votes. If you're interested, you can run yourself. But that's how change happens inside of a party. It's like there's no magic bullet to get us back into power, to convince people in the handful of states that are preventing us from having a real Senate majority ever that we can do things with. Those are long-term shifts in the electorate that there's nothing you can really do about that.
Yeah.
But what you can do is you can use the power that you have to bring about the kind of leaders that you want to see in the party and to fight for it. And I think that's one of the things that people should be doing, is making a commitment to retiring any Democrat that votes for this bill, but in a broader sense, any Democrat who has spent the last several months obeying in advance, capitulating to Trump, like cozying up to them, like throwing trans people under the bus. I want all these people gone, man.
Yeah. I should point out, by the time the show drops, who knows what the resolution, if there will be a resolution of this, but at this moment, there are only 2 Democrats on record as saying they're going to vote to end the filibuster. As we speak, David, there are only 2 Democrats on record as saying they will be voting to end the filibuster. And there's 1 Republican on record saying that he will vote to uphold the filibuster. So they're still 6 shy of ending the filibuster. And, I've never seen anything like that, where the party leader has been openly defied by the party. I can't imagine it happening with Nancy Pelosi. You mentioned her, David. I just can't imagine that happening with Nancy Pelosi or Michael Joseph Madigan here in Illinois. The leader of the House, the leader of the Senate, generally has a very good head count. So either there are some Democrats who are quietly planning to vote with the Republicans on this one, but they're just too chicken to announce it, or Schumer is setting a precedent for weak leadership by being on the losing end of his party's fight. Just think about it, David. I can't see anything he gains from this in any practical way, unless, like I said, there are 5 Democrats or 6 Democrats who are quietly have assured him that push come to shove. And this will be the biggest fraud about the whole thing. You watch, David. They'll, if it happens, they'll vote with the Republicans to end the filibuster, and then they'll make a big deal about voting no against the actual budget. This is a classic Chicago. I always say, man, if you want to see what little regard they have for you as thinkers, voters, just look at Chicago politics. They do this all the time in the city council. They vote against, the alderman will vote against the literal tax hike and and then vote for the budget, or vice versa.
I mean, what I've been saying for a while, Ben, is that, like, for the next 2 years, Democrats should not agree to any long-term funding bill for these people. Like, the Trump people should be treated like somebody with bad credit who wants to rent an apartment. Okay. And you make them go month to month and certify that they're following the law, right? Like, put You put some riders in there that requires Trump to spend the money, as you know. I mean, like, he shouldn't have to do that, right? But get your Republican colleagues on board, demanding that the White House, that the executive branch carry out the laws passed by Congress, as our constitutional system demands. And once you've established the principle that you're going to make some demands in exchange for your votes, one of those demands should be like, get Elon Musk out of my government. You know, like, I wouldn't sign a CR until he agrees to, like, basically dismantle the Department of Government Efficiency, or to put some real, you know, like, put an actual Senate confirmed human being in charge of it instead of Elon Musk. You know, you want to create a new agency, go through the process. And then at the end of 30 days, you look back and like, are they behaving legally? Okay, you can have another 30 days of funding. And that's it. That's how you govern for the next 2 years. Like, to me, there's nothing, like, at this point, there's nothing that Trump and his friends could say to me that would make me believe that they're gonna obey the rule of law, and run the country responsibly, like they care about what happens to the people that live in it. And given that reality, which is sinking in with the public actually pretty quickly, like the polls are pretty stark right now. Trump is underwater on his handling of the economy, which is like really his own, you know, his only real benefit politically is that he happened to take office in 2017 at a time of economic prosperity, and he didn't do anything to screw it up. And now he's doing something to screw it up, and he's starting to pay for it in polling. And so Democrats are capitulating at the feet of someone that they fear for no reason, because he's pissing away his political capital faster than anyone I've ever seen in my life. So don't give them 6 months to work on their plans. Make them come back to the table and beg you every 30 days for the next 18 months. Yeah. That's my plan. That's the fairest plan.
All right. I'm looking at the clock, and we're pretty much running out of time. I was going to actually, Trump changed everything, or actually Schumer changed everything. I was going to dedicate this show to talk about foreign policy in Ukraine, and we only have like 5 minutes left, but I do feel I should ask you at least one question about what went down in the White House about, what was it, a week ago or 2 weeks ago, where Trump and Vance tag team Zelensky. I've never seen anything like it. And the vacillations of Trump on Ukraine and Russia are astounding. It's like his vacillations on tariffs and immigration. I'm not even sure if he believes in anything other than trash talking and getting wealthier from government. But your general thoughts about what Trump and Vance did to Zelensky and the impact of that. And we'll close with that. Go ahead.
Well, look, I mean, obviously the behavior of the Trump administration in general towards Ukraine and Zelensky has been just utterly disgraceful. They set up like a public televised ambush for him so that they could like titillate their viewers on their weird YouTube channels and Real America's Voice TV. It was a whole media event aimed at the Republican base, and aimed at like basically convincing Republican rank and file that the Russian talking points about the entire post-Cold War period are the correct ones, and that it is the United States and its allies that have more or less invited several rounds of Russian aggression and territorial aggrandizement by expanding NATO. Because Ukraine is like this personal, like, Forrest Gump villain for President Trump, right? Yeah. It doesn't make any sense on a strategic level, right? Like, what's really going on here? Trump hates Ukraine. Like, Ukraine has played a role in like so many Trump scandals. It was part of his first impeachment. Obviously, it was like the source of his first impeachment. And Zelensky was the character then too. And so he hates Zelensky. He hates the role that Zelensky has played in his presidencies. He wants to punish Ukraine. He sympathizes with, he likes Putin better than he likes Zelensky. I don't think it was in that meeting, but like there was another interview with Trump kind of around that time period where he started talking about everything that he and Putin had gone through together in 2017. He's like, yeah, I mean, he went through a lot with the Russia hoax. I mean, like, in Trump's brain, And Trump's like disease-riddled, like lizard brain. Vladimir Putin is like the protagonist of the story of American foreign policy of the last 10 years. And so on a very basic level, the fallout from that meeting was much broader than just Zelensky. What allies have seen is that the United States has joined the axis of tyranny. Right? And the United States elected a malignant authoritarian openly to run the country, and that's what he's doing. And we are in the process of seeing our whole sort of like democratic alliance system, the global trade system, just turned on its ear, because the United States is the most important actor in the world in the maintenance of these systems. You know, the World Trade Organization, NATO, right? Like none of these are, I mean, we could have 6 episodes about all the problems with these institutions, right? But like replacing them with an axis of tyranny would be worse. And so the fallout from that Zelensky meeting goes well beyond the humiliation of this like very brave man who's been fighting just a brutal, savage, authoritarian monster in Vladimir Putin. Right? Like, that's the person we should be standing with, right? And it's disgraceful that we're not. But in a broader sense, right, like we are in the process of destroying 80 years of very hard-won American, what we call soft power. Right? Like we are seeing the erosion of our influence. We are seeing our friends and allies start to work together to replace our role in the system and to build up alternative defense and trading mechanisms to assure the stability and the survival of democracies around the world. And then we're not going to be part of that anymore. And no one will ever be able to trust that we will be again, because this is what the electorate chose. They had all the information in front of them and they chose this. And so, you know, none of this stuff is going to be easy to put back together. Of course, Trump is like, seems like he's reversing course again with Ukraine. Like, who knows, right? Like we're at the whims of a mad king. This could all change by the time this episode airs. So that's not really the point. The point is that Trump is Trump. He's a malignant, horrendous narcissist with authoritarian tendencies who loves other dictators, hates democracies, loves bullying people. Everything is transactional, and that's how people are going to look at us until the voters prove otherwise. And I'm not even sure that they'll be able to trust us at that point. So it's just a complete disaster.
By the way, we'll close here, but I just have a little smile. So many people tell me this, that the Democrats have to be more than against Trump. And after listening to your riff, I'm like, no, I think at the moment, being against Trump is enough at the moment. Okay. Like, you know, when you think about just one little tiny thing, that little show he put on the White House lawn where he was pimping for a Tesla after years of bashing electric car industry and saying climate change is a hoax. And all of a sudden he's pimping, oh, what a great car. I think I'll buy one. It's like a showroom dealer. I'm like, nah, I think being against Trump should be enough. Okay. What else are you going to do for me? You got to be more than against Trump. I go, isn't he bad enough? No, I'm an undecided voter. God, what a system. The American electorate. All right, David, I'll let you go, and I'll see you later this week. Just a personal aside. So thank you very much for coming on, and I'll see you real soon, all right?
Great to be here, Ben. I look forward to seeing you again.
All right, so I want to thank producer DJ Nate. He does an outstanding job, and I know David agrees with what they say. Hey, producer Nate, give yourself a raise. Take it out of petty cash. Peace and love, everybody.